Okay, we are live.
Okay, we are live. All right. Welcome, everybody. At this time, I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Suffern Central Board of Education, Tuesday, August 18th, 2020. Let the record reflect that all board members are present, as well as many administrators. Please, before we rise for the pledge, I'll read into record the executive session motion. The chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of reviewing with the acting superintendent of schools, assistant superintendent of business, and school attorney litigation brought by East Ramapo Central School District versus Suffern Central School District, Rockland County Supreme Court Index Number 3241/2020, and related appeal to the Commissioner of Education dated 7/2020. Reviewing with the acting superintendent of schools and school attorney the matter of Eric Rizzo versus Suffern Central School District. Reviewing with the acting superintendent of schools, assistant superintendent for human resources, and school attorney the employment history of pedagogical employee 08182020. Reviewing with the acting superintendent of schools, assistant superintendent for human resources, and school attorney ball coaching and extra classroom assignments, and discussing engagement of general counsel and alternate counsel. Okay, now we can rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. 1.07, minutes of the regular meeting, July 21st, 2020. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Mr. Shapiro, do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Nickpon, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Any abstentions? 1.08, minutes of the special meeting of July 30th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Oh, that was like three at the same time. I think I got Angus there. Do I have a second? The first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Cairns? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. 1.09, acting superintendent comments.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I am going to start by sharing some really wonderful news that came out this summer, a couple of weeks ago, regarding our athletic teams. And I just want to make sure I capture it correctly. I want to check the name. So we have been recognized by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association as a Scholar Athlete School of Distinction. This is the highest honor that sports teams can be recognized for, or a school can be recognized for. And the qualifications for being a school of distinction is that 100% of our sports teams qualified as Scholar Athlete teams. So that's a tremendous accomplishment for our whole, sports program, Suffern High School, our athletic department led by Andy Guccione, all of our coaches, and of course our student athletes and their families who make this possible. There were 5 teams in Section 1, 5 schools in Section 1 that were recognized with this highest distinction, and we had the most teams out of all of them. So we had 23 teams between the fall and winter season, all of which earned Scholar Athlete status and led to us being a school of distinction. So this is a really wonderful honor, especially now as we're waiting as patiently as we can to find out news about our sports programs for this year. But congratulations to all of our student athletes, coaches, parents, administrators, everyone who works in the programs, teachers to support the kids academically. You know, this is truly a team effort and a wonderful recognition for our school. And that's all I have for now. I'm going to say a few more things later in the meeting.
All right, well, that's great. And I think that that's really wonderful to have that recognition. Congratulations to everybody involved, from the students to the athletic director and the coaches and everybody in between. Public participation. This is public participation on action items only. Heather, do you have public participation for this portion of the meeting?
Not for this portion.
Not for this portion, okay. So we will close this portion of the meeting and move to action items. So we have action items 2.01 through 2.21. So before we move to vote on a consent agenda, are there any action items that anybody wishes to pull? Melissa?
I'd like to pull 2.04, 2.12, 2.16, and 2.19.
Okay, 2.14.
No, 2.04.
Oh, sorry, 2.04, 2.12, 2.16, and 2.19.
Perfect.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So then, so we'll do a consent agenda for, this will be for action items 2.01 through 2.03, 2.05 through 2.11, 2.13 through 2.15, 2.17, 2.18, 2.20, and 2.21. Okay. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Moved.
Mr. McKenzie, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Shapiro, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Any abstentions? Okay. 2.04 supplemental memorandum of agreement. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Mr. McKenzie, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cairns? Discussion. Any discussion?
I just wanted to have a little of an explanation on the supplemental memorandum of agreement. I wasn't really sure what it was for or what it's doing. So if somebody can just explain it, please.
Mr. Martone, can you take that one, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did in this supplemental, let me just pull it up, was we added Eric Coronato's position wasn't in the unit. There was a different civil service title, so we ended his Director of Information Technology Services. So that would be what number one. That's number 2, 3, and number 4. We're adding it to those 4 sections. In addition, for number 4, for our IT department, what happened over.
I'm sorry, can people mute, please? Because I'm having trouble hearing.
Sure.
Okay.
So for all 4 of those, it was adding the position, the Director of Technology position. And then number 4 was just outlining what the IT department does during times where we are on winter or spring recess, because that wasn't outlined in the current collective bargaining agreement. It was outlined for some of the members, Director of Facilities, Custodial 3. It was outlined for administrative assistants, and the ITs it was not. So they're sort of fall in between what's required of those different groups.
Was he in a different, like, were the IT people in a different union? Were they all CSCA or? not
Well, our
CSD.
previous one was certificated, so he wasn't in there. And then before Mr. Coronado, it was a different civil service title. Civil service has changed that title. So we wanted to make sure the current title was in the unit.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other discussion? No? Okay, so for 2.04, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Motion passes. 2.12, this is the District Comprehensive Improvement Plan. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Ms. Reamer, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. McKenzie, discussion.
I was just wondering what this is, if it's something that we do every year and I just missed it prior years, or if this is, you know, if somebody can just explain it, Lee, please.
I will, but I'm going to ask everyone to mute again because I'm hearing a lot of feedback on my end. So this is not something that's done every year. This is something that's new. What this is this year, one of our elementary schools was designated as a targeted support and improvement school due to one subgroup in one school building. And as a result, we are identified as a targeted district. The first step in addressing that is this district comprehensive improvement plan. So we've put that plan together over the last several months. The last pieces were put together this last week, which included a stakeholder meeting. We had parents, teachers, other administrators as part of the meeting to sort of, say, yes, this is the plan we need to do and it makes sense, and ask questions and things like that. And so this is a requirement of the state because of that designation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're muted, Matt.
Thank you. I never mute, so I wasn't used to that. Okay, I guess there's no other comments about that. We're good? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. 2.16, this is the 2020-2021 budget transfers. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Mr. McKenzie, second.
Second.
Mr. Cairns, discussion.
I had a question on this. I guess maybe Steve can help me with this. We're transferring this money from all of these balances back into the capital funds, like the first one that's transferring. And then money that came in from tuition from private school or private people who live outside the school district. So that money comes in as revenue, and then we're putting it into the tertiaries. Is that how I'm reading it? Because it says refund of taxes for the tertiaries.
No, that's not correct at all.
That's what it says. Okay.
No, what these are appropriation accounts. These are not revenue accounts. So these are appropriations that we did not spend. So we're transferring balances from one appropriation account to another appropriation account. That's what's happening.
So, for instance, what happened with the tuition from private school and the refund of taxes? Why? What was the matter? What was off on the budget?
Well, those appropriation accounts had balances left that we were able to transfer into accounts that didn't have balances left. Simply put.
Okay, so explain the transfer to me from tuition private to refund of taxes.
Okay, if you're talking about the 158,520.
I'm talking about the $432,952.55.
Correct. That balance was left in the tuition paid to private schools that we didn't pay, that I won't say we didn't pay, we didn't use. We budget so much money every year to pay tuition to private schools. Now, sometimes we use it all, sometimes we're very close, sometimes we're not. In this particular case, in our budget, we have this amount of money to be able to transfer from tuition private schools to refund of taxes, which we have to do because of our tax rates. Again, are, as you know, very large every year.
So basically what you're telling me is we didn't have to pay the private school tuitions and we were able to cover the taxes. Like, even though we paid out taxes, we were able to transfer that from an operating budget line.
That's correct. From one appropriation account to another. Correct.
Right.
Right.
Because if you didn't have the money to do that, or you didn't have the appropriations to do that, you would be taking it out of the reserve, correct?
Or fund balance. Correct. Either one. Yes. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Last is 2.19. This is a resolution for the 2020-2021 tax rate. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Mr. Shapiro, a second?
Second.
Mr. McKenzie, discussion.
Well, I did some calculations from the tax rates. And I just wanted to make it very clear that we were told that the dollar change of this tax increase of 1.25 was going to be $60. It was not an increase of 1.25. It was an increase of 2.33%. And that's what I was talking about, the assessed values changing, or the equalization rate changing. But I just want to make sure, because people were saying it's going to be $60. Some people on social media was saying it was going to be $120. And it's not $90, it's not $39, but for a regular 50,000 assessed value, that's the assessed value that's usually placed on a high ranch home in our area, which is the majority of the homes in this area. 50,000 assessed value is an increase in your taxes of $225 a year. And then anytime we do a tax increase, it's going to be increased on that. So when the school district gave an amount of $60,000 increase, it was 275% off from the actual increase of $225.12. And I just wanted to just point that out, that we need to be careful when we give these numbers out to the public about what we're saying.
Can you explain how you ascertain that from the information in the resolution?
Absolutely.
Because I don't understand it.
Okay, you have a tax rate. If you look at the tax rate, now I only did this for Ramapo, because that's the majority of our taxpayers. So within Ramapo, our tax rate is $197. It's like 1.04903. So figure $197.10. Now, for a $50,000 assessed value, you would take 50, so just not with the thousands, just 50 times 197, and that would give you your rate that would give you what your bill is going to be. And then you take, or what you could do is, and then last year the rate was 193,202, 587, and that you can get off of your last year's bill. So just looking at those two numbers, 197, 104903 minus 193, 202, 587. I wish I could pull this up so you could see it. That's a difference of $4.50 for every for every, 50
So what you're saying is, again, they're not having it all in front of us, but what you're saying is so the 2019-20 tax rate was 193
Yes.
and change? Okay.
And that's
what
not
you're-
including the library, that's not including.
No, I understand. I'm trying to see where you're getting that $4 from, that's all.
Right, so $4.50 times the 50 that you would use from a $50,000 assessed value, because it's per thousand. So it's $4.50 per thousand, so it's 50, gives you $225.12 different. But that's how anybody can do when they see these tax rates, whether it's the school district, the village, the, whatever town you're in, that's how you can.
So you're taking that $4 times 50 and getting 200.
I'm just getting like feedback from something. I don't know if it's me or that's how you get the 225. So you could always get your tax rate. You would just take your assessed value and you would times it by the rate. And that's how you get, except you take off the thousand. So if you have a.
Yeah, no, I got that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Again, not having the information. I wanted to just get a feel for where you were coming from. And Steve, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Can everybody mute, please?
Yeah, I think it's gone now.
There it goes. Yeah, I would just add in isolation, it's really about $200 when you take in the other two towns, but I'll tell you what happened. Quite simply, when you go back to when we were doing the budget, and I have it here in the slide, we were very clear that we were using the tentative tax roll and that things were going to change, and we have no control, obviously, over assessments or equalization rates. We were using the best information that was provided to us at the time. And basically what happened from the tentative roll until now is there was a loss of almost $2.4 million on the assessment roll. And the town of Ramapo only lost 0.7%. But the town of Haverstraw lost 2.2% of its roll, and Tuxedo 2.1% of its roll. So basically then what happens is there's also, there's a compounding issue here that happens, is not only the loss of the 6.4 million overall of the assessment to spread our levy across, you also now have the town of Ramapo actually now takes on more of the levy, because now it represents a greater piece of the pie in total assessments as well. So that shift also happens slightly. So yes, her math is absolutely correct when you take just the town of Ramapo into account. And again, when we did our budgetary presentations, we were very clear about this information was from the tentative roll. I was actually very clear as well about, I don't like giving information from the tentative roll, but that's what we were asked to do, so we did it. And again, you're very correct. We have no control over assessments and how they move back and forth. As we know, every year we try to raise about $1 million in our tax levy for taxes, and as of tonight, we've given back just about all of it. So for last year's budget, we gave back everything of the levy that we tried to raise to support the budget has now been given back. So again, we have no control over that. Is the
Right,
no doubt about it.
but that's exactly what I was saying about the pieces of the pie and how your share of the pie gets bigger and what happens because of the assessments. So I think we just need to be very, very careful about what role we're using and the numbers that we're giving to the public to vote on a budget and say that it's only going to be a $60 increase, I think is very deceiving. And that's what I was trying to tell people, as well as the board members, what goes on with the rates. I mean, I've seen it firsthand about what's going on with how these things change and the pieces of the pie change. You have to pay more. So it's not just a 1.25 increase, it's a 2.33% increase. And that's a big difference. So when you're voting for these increases, we just have to be very careful about what we're voting for and what we're passing down to our constituents and our residents, and think about the position that they're in.
Steve, what did you say the percentage was for Ramapo that came off the roll?
Ramapo lost 0.7%, but Ramapo lost $3.997 million off of their assessment roll.
Okay.
Capistrano lost $2.26 million, but that represents 2.2% of their roll. And Tuxedo lost $149,500, which represents 2.1% of their roll. So
okay.
that's the difference. We basically, of our total assessment of the three towns, overall, we lost 1% of the tax roll to be able to spread our levy across.
Okay.
And overall, we have 3 towns in the play. The increase is just 2%.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have other questions regarding this?
Hey, Matt, also, Ms. Reamer pointed that out during the budget conversations that we were having in the public, with the public. And she also, for what it's worth, just gave you numbers based on the average house. I mean, that's on, she's saying that's on an average 2,000 square foot ranch home. There are houses that are much bigger than that are going to be paying a lot more taxes than just the $225 that she's telling you about.
Okay.
Good point, Angus. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for anybody? Okay. Then we'll move on here. Okay, so all right, where are we? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, that will do it for action items. 4.01 information items on the, this is a reopening team update. I'm not sure who's taking the lead on this, Lee or
That will be Dr. Castaldo. Thank you. And if everyone can mute, except Dr. Castaldo.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'm sorry. I forgot to mute. And let me see if I can get this to share. Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. So we've got a reopening team update. The last update I gave to you was July 21st, the last regular meeting. Since that, a lot has happened, including numerous other meetings where we did share information with the public. We had, obviously, along the way, many meetings with parents. We had student meetings, we had faculty meetings and teacher meetings, staff meetings. But then once the governor made his directives on August 6th, we've since then had August 7th, we've had several meetings with families as well. So I just want to talk about that. So the goal for the team has always been to create this plan that focused on preserving the health and safety of each member of the community. And that became very important for us. There we go. So we are now in the green. If you remember, we had 5 different phases. We're in phase 5, where what we are doing at this point is working on operationalizing the plan and the governor's directives from August 7th and the eventual school reopening. So for some reason, there seems to be a lag. When I advance it, it's not advancing, sorry. So on August 7th, what the governor said is that schools could reopen, but in advance of reopening, we needed to post on our website our COVID testing plan. So that's a piece of the reopening plan that we put together, our contact tracing plan, and our robust remote plan. Initially, we had to have at least 3 discussions with parents by August 21st, where we explain the plan and answer questions, and 1 discussion with teachers by the same time frame. At this point, 2 of the parent discussions have occurred, both a general one and an elementary one. and the discussion with the staff and teachers has occurred. We have one more discussion with parents planned for tomorrow night, which is more secondary in nature because we targeted those discussions so parents could hone in on the individual things that they needed answers to. So let's talk a little bit about our COVID screening and testing plan because the governor really wanted us to focus on this. Each day of attendance, students need to have their temperature checked in advance of leaving their home. Staff need to have their temperature check as well, and students need to screen for symptoms, the list of COVID symptoms that have been provided. Daily, staff need to fill out a questionnaire that answers things such as, do you have any symptoms? Do you have a temperature? Have you gone to any of these states that have high spike rates, et cetera, et cetera? And that needs to be filled out weekly for the students. Anyone who comes to the school and has any sort of symptom, anybody in our buildings with a symptom is immediately isolated. They need to be sent home, and then they would return to school with appropriate documentation from medical personnel, which may mean a letter from the doctor that says they were not exhibiting COVID symptoms, but symptoms of something else. Let's say they have an infection, a strep throat or something instead. If the doctor feels it's warranted to do a COVID test, the person then needs to go for testing. That testing would be, the COVID testing would be done by your private healthcare provider or by the Rockland County Department of Health, somewhere that they have on their list to send. And you can return to school after the testing, dependent on the Rockland County Department of Health guidelines. There are various different guidelines of when people can return to school. Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES has a very robust safety response training department, and they have worked on these COVID safety response protocols for all of the districts to use. So when we do COVID response or contact tracing, it's always in collaboration with our local Department of Health, and they're relying on guidance from the state Department of Health. So we are not, as a school district, solely responsible for either the testing of COVID or for the contact tracing, but we're going to be working with the Department of Health on it. So when we look at this, these are the different response levels we would have to someone presenting in our buildings in various different ways. So the first one is a red light, stop. That's a problem. It's someone who's COVID positive and they're either student or staff. And then we would step through these steps to ensure that the district is safe after having someone who is COVID positive in the building. The two yellows, things that we need to watch for, if someone is a contact of a known COVID positive, they are quarantined, or if someone has had symptoms that warranted a COVID test and the test result is pending. This is a big iffy area right now because some people are reporting that COVID response, the testing response can take up to 2 weeks, or I've heard it take 3 days, but we need something clearly a lot smaller, shorter than that to be very effective. These two yellow areas likewise have various types of COVID response. The big difference between all of these and the red, which is the most heightened response, is that we would most probably need to close a building if someone in the red was in the building, whereas for the rest of the responses, you can see we don't need to close a building. So any of these blank squares, any of these, they actually say no action required. It's just hard to read on this screen. So again, we have a red response, we have two yellow responses. A green response is a contact of a contact. And we heard a lot about this in March before we closed. The majority of the people in our buildings who had contact with anyone actually had contact of a contact, meaning someone they knew had been in contact with someone who was COVID positive. Again, if that starts happening, these are the responses we would take. So you can see they have spelled out for us all of the different levels of response we would need to have, including this one on the bottom, where a student or a staff member who's already in the building starts to present with symptoms. And then we would step through these pieces if someone presents with symptoms. And similar to what I said before, we're going to evaluate, we're going to isolate you, we're going to send you home, and your doctor will decide whether a COVID test is warranted or not. So robust remote learning. The decision was made to move to opening the schools in September in a robust remote learning environment. When we looked at all of the pieces of the pie that I just showed you, including the fact that COVID testing turnaround time is so long, including the fact that we are not sure how well students will do with masks on all day. We need to worry about the protocol of students moving through the building. All of those pieces put together, coupled with the fact that September, if we're in a hybrid environment, most students would have been in the building perhaps 5 or 6 days only, led the decision to be made that we would move to a robust remote environment for September and phase in that move to the hybrid learning end of September, beginning of October. That gives us September to bring in targeted groups of students for targeted activities and judge the response and the protocols that we have in place. So when we look at robust remote, that's very different than the crisis distance learning that we had in March, April, May, and June. That was a turnaround on the dime, get everyone learning using Google Meet, using Google Classroom. That was not something that is the best practice moving forward. What we want moving forward is a true robust remote learning environment for all of our students. So with the NICED directives that were given and the governor's directives were some guidelines on what robust remote needs to look like. What exactly do we need to do to ensure that all students are learning effectively in a remote learning environment? So that would include substantive daily contact, including homeroom with attendance each day. So a morning meeting for those elementary kiddos, a homeroom for the secondary kiddos where there's attendance taken each day and visual check-ins with the teachers. So teachers can see the way I can see all of you and see your response right now to me speaking. They're going to be able to see the students and make sure that everyone is okay. They're going to get to know the students in this manner. They'll get to know their body language. They'll get to know when something looks amiss or not. So we've got those visual check-ins and attendance each day. That daily contact will continue throughout the day with both synchronous, which is live in person, and also asynchronous, which is the more recorded lessons and activities that a child is doing on their own, teaching, with all of that factored in with screen time, best practices for screen time. So students are not continually on the screen, but a lesson might open up with a 15-minute, 20-minute teacher synchronous lesson, and then the child is off on their own for independent practice. And the independent practice would not necessarily be with the screen on, so that students are not in the screen environment at all times. All of the teaching and the daily contact each day will work heavily to build the rapport and relationships with students. The engagement of students is key for their successful learning in the remote environment. So we will be working on that throughout all of the remote learning activities. One of the things that the remote learning group looked at was compressing curriculum. And we're in a very different world now than we were last year. With using remote or hybrid learning, we will need to compress the curriculum, which means we need to look at the core and essential pieces of the curriculum and make sure those are the pieces that are taught and that students are exposed to. So not the vast expanse of curriculum, but a more compressed curriculum with all the core essentials. Each of our school buildings will have a tech repair space. As you know, in the spring, one of the big pieces that we had to take care of first in order for remote learning to be successful was for each student to have a device and to have access to the internet. So we're working to ensure that's still in place while providing a third piece, that tech repair space. Because now that you've had your iPad or your Chromebook or your Wi-Fi hotspot for 3, 4, 5 months, perhaps it needs repair. Perhaps they're breaking. So we're going to be able to switch off devices in the buildings. So each building will have its own tech repair space. And we are returning to our traditional grading practices, which means things like participation, attendance, completing assignments on time. All of those usual standards of grading will be in effect moving forward in September as well. Let's see if I can move that. This is a sample of the remote schedule environment for elementary students. So when school begins on September 10th of this year, a sample elementary school child would have a schedule like this. As you can see, in each day, there is an IE block for each grade. You can see here, IE. It's gray, so it's easy to see. So IE is something that's very, very unique to Suffern Central, but works very well in the remote environment. It's the intervention and enrichment block. And at the elementary level, this will drive the schedule. So we can plan the entire schedule around those IE blocks. Individual teachers can then determine where they will use their content area blocks based on when their IE block is. IE blocks are at a different time for each grade level, and they allow for things like related services if you're a student with an IEP or a 504, things like reading instruction, AIS instruction, math group work, enrichment work, lessons and band, I believe, are put into these blocks. These blocks will still occur in the remote environment, and the rest of the schedule will move around that. So we've got a complete schedule set up for students in the remote environment, which is very different than the spring semester. Okay, next steps. What do we need to do to get ourselves ready for September 10th? So one of the big pieces of moving, beginning with robust remote and moving into and phasing in the hybrid learning plan is giving students opportunities to have time in the buildings, opportunities to do things like virtual meet the teacher nights, and then kindergarten, sixth grade and freshman orientations, small groups coming into the buildings, student visit days to learn the movement of the hallways, because all of the hallways will be targeted with signage up and arrows which way to move throughout the building. They will be given the opportunity to pick up remote resources. So say there's a special art project, you need to come to the building to pick up art materials. That will be allowed as well. So we'll be able to test the protocols that we have, test the mask wearing, test the movement throughout the building by giving these opportunities. And then opening day is September 10th, and we have the phase in of hybrid learning throughout September and beginning in October. Any thoughts, any questions?
Yes, Dr. Castaldo.
Yes.
Quick question. Will the staff of the buildings be in the buildings during the robust virtual period?
I only got every other word of that. Can you repeat the question?
Will staff be in their buildings and in their classrooms to get in touch with the students on the computer and so forth?
So during robust remote, staff will be given the option, but they're not required to come into the building. So some staff want to teach from the building, some staff do not. That can occur as long as we are not on another lockdown like occurred in March. So, you know, if the governor shuts down the entire state, our buildings aren't open either. But right now, this is a very different environment than that. So staff can come in the building and can teach from their classrooms. However, even if they are at home with remote learning, they will be accessible to students on the computer. They will be accessible during their teaching block for students to reach out to them and gain assistance if they need it.
How about, say, for example, guidance counselors?
I'm sorry.
How about, for example, guidance counselors?
Guidance counselors will be available for their students as well. They will reach out at the beginning of the year the way they normally do. They usually greet their students, they meet their students. All of that can occur in the remote environment as well.
Just to add to that, I know some guidance counselors have already set up Google Classrooms for their students. So the students already.
And I also wanted to add in Suffern High School, the guidance counselors have reached out to students. And I just want to thank them for going the extra mile and being there for the students, as well as the reopening team. I think that all of the work that went into this is unbelievable. And I just want to thank all of you, whoever was involved in this, Dr. Castaldo, Mrs. Weber, you know, some of the board members and the teachers, the union, staff, and those people from the public. I wasn't on the team, but I can't even begin to tell you how much I appreciate all the hard work that went into this and the work that you did and the decision to not open. So I just want to personally say I'm thankful that 4,700 people were safe, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns?
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank Dr. Castaldo and Mrs. Weber for their hard work, and also just to attest from a personal experience how different the COVID testing is, and the turnaround times being there's a wide discrepancy in terms of when they come back. I can attest from my practice where I could get a test back in 24 hours. I could get a test back in 2 weeks. And one of the things, we had a family of 5 people, one test came back in a day and the last test came back in 10 days. So they were tested at the same time. And that's just an example of the differences in the turnaround time. And, you know, one of my biggest concerns with, you know, the potential decision to have kids in the building was this difficulty of getting test results back and the waiting and the uncertainty and what do we do with that. So I want to offer, you know, my support to the decision, but also just to give some personal background that it's happening. I also want to say I'm encouraged that there's some new technology coming out, and hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll be able to get some saliva testing that's relatively new that has shown some really good results in really short times. So I want to basically tell parents that there is some hope on the horizon, and I think, you know, that's something we're looking towards, and I think a big factor in the decision to go hybrid and eventually go back to school. So I just want to offer that.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Nick Pana, I'm glad you mentioned that. Was it this morning, Lee, or yesterday morning that I texted you at 7:30 in the morning? They're talking about batch testing, and they're talking about a saliva test that will get back in 3 or 4 hours, and
yes.
how excited I was.
Yes.
That's something that could help us to move forward, because that turnaround was really scary. If we send someone, you know, we send 3 kiddos home and we don't find out for 10 days, we don't know who was exposed or not in that time. But that's what it's come to, is I'm texting early in the morning. Listen to what I heard today. Maybe this is going to help. So, we're very hopeful. I do think waiting September should get us over that hump. I think it was a really good decision to just kind of wait that out, get things better in place. So yes, we're hopeful. We're hopeful.
Mrs. Weber indicated on Facebook that only about 25% of the PPEs were ordered. Will everything be in and ready to go by the first week in September?
It's not that only 25% were ordered, only 25% were received.
Yeah,
we do have some updated shipping dates. And I mean, if they come when they say they'll come, yes. But most of the shipping dates we've been given this summer is not when the materials arrived.
Mm-hmm. And we started ordering things. John Palma and I were talking about this as early as May, and he had already ordered many things, and he was ordering things all through June, and we thought we were going to have them by July or August for the original shipping date. So, you know, we'll see when they get here.
Just a question with regard to the face masks. Will the students be provided with a face mask every day? Will the teachers have a face mask every day? What kind of face mask will the teachers have? Will it be an N95 versus a normal medical face mask?
So what we've been encouraged and told to provide are the normal face masks, not N95s. We are to provide daily for the teachers face masks, but they are encouraged to bring in their own. Students are encouraged to bring in their own. Obviously, if they don't have a mask or something happens to their mask during the day, I'm not going to tell you who told me the story, but some child in the South kindergartner dropped his face mask, on the floor in the men's room right away. So these things happen. Then we'll be giving out masks, but they're the cloth, the papery cloth masks, the blue ones that everyone uses. Those are what we're required to have, not N95s.
Not for the teachers?
No, we're not required to give N95s. And in fact, I've heard it's discouraged to use those. We have to look into that again.
With regard to the taking of the temperature at home, what happens if the parent at home does not have a temperature gauge?
Well, I would imagine most of them do, but I haven't encountered that at all yet. Certainly, that's something we can look into if a parent lets us know that. But they're certifying each day or attesting each day that they took the temperature and the temperature was less than 100. Because if it's 100 or above, you need to stay home.
Heaven forbid if a teacher does get sick and they have to be out for 2 weeks, will that 2-week period be taken off their sick days, or will they be specially accounted for?
Okay, so I think that's a question for Mr. Matone, who's the expert in that piece of it. Are you there?
I am. That would fall under the Family Cares Act. So they would have up to 10 days at their daily salary up to $511 for those 2 weeks.
So would it
if
count?
If it's a positive test.
Will it count against their sick days?
It would not. If they're eligible for that leave, it would not.
Melissa, your hand. I see your hand.
Thank you so much. I just want to say, now I don't know this, and it may be something that the governor came out with, that you said that if their temperature is 100 or more. When I had COVID, it was 99.5, and I was positive. And with COVID, you don't have to have a high fever. You don't have to have any fever. So that's what makes me nervous. Like, if they do have 99.5 and they're walking around and they say, oh, well, my kid's fine to go to school, and they're still positive.
Right. So that's one of the many signs or symptoms you're looking for. And it's the one that everyone's most focused on. But there is a list of signs and symptoms, and it's possible that many people won't actually run the fever, or at least not right away. But that's something that we have to check. And it is stated to be 100 or more that we have to prohibit attendance at that point.
And I'm just wondering, for the safety and healthiness of the students and the staff, and I don't mean one's more important than the other, but I'm saying for the staff, like if you went anywhere, like Chick-fil-A, for instance, they have these plastic guards that they put over, even have a mask, and they have the plastic guards. Do you give those out? Or is it okay for a teacher or a student to maybe wear those as well as maybe the mask? But especially if they're little, maybe that's easier to get on them. I don't know. I don't have little kids anymore, but I couldn't even keep my kids in the stroller, let alone get a mask on their face.
The state guidelines say that staff are allowed to wear face shields, but they also must have a mask on. So you can wear the shield in addition to the mask, but not instead of.
Any other questions?
What about the teachers basically have a choice then with regard to when September starts. If school is opened in a hybrid situation, they have the opportunity or choice to either teach in school or to teach still in a online program. Is that correct?
Well, not really. We're opening in September remote, and teachers at that point have the choice of being either remote at home or remote in their classrooms. As we move to hybrid, they would be expected to come in and teach, or they would actually be working with both sets of cohorts and would be in. If they have a reason they cannot do that, that again would be referred to Mr. Matone, and he would handle any of those accommodations that are asked for. Do you want to expand on that a little?
About 1/3 of the teaching staff, I believe, is over the age of 50. If they don't feel safe and comfortable coming into the building, will they have the opportunity to stay out of the building?
So all of that would fall under what are the CDC high risk. And I believe the high risk, they've identified it as being 65 and above. So you'd have to fall into that category. And there's 8 categories. I'm not going to tell you what I say to everybody about who would fall into those categories or not. And anybody that knows me is going to giggle. But, there's like 7 or 8 categories. And if you're in those categories, again, you would speak to Mr. Matone about getting an accommodation. But that's something that would be handled on an individual basis and would be based on whatever you feel, which category you fall into.
So currently what we're doing is for anyone that's requested an accommodation, we sent a form out to them per the advice of our legal counsel. And it essentially lists what their disability or their condition is, what accommodations they feel they need. There's a spot for their physician to fill it out, what accommodations they feel they need. And then at that point, we would review them with our medical consultant. We would do what's called the interactive process with the employee, which is anytime an employee feels he needs an accommodation. And then we would reach and try to come to an agreement on an appropriate accommodation for that employee. However, if the children are all in the building, an appropriate accommodation might not be working remotely because we would need people in the buildings with the students. So we would do whatever else we could to accommodate them in the buildings at that point.
What about with regard to bus transportation? I've read, a number of different articles that, maybe it should be one student, in the seat, every other seat empty, or what is the process at this point regarding transportation?
So the guidelines are coming again from the DOH and from state ed, and there is actually some differences there is slight differences between the two, but the Department of Health trumps the other. And it's that students are in seats by themselves, but they can sit with family members. So if you have siblings, can sit together. One of them says 1 in a row, one of them says 2 in a row. And so we are working all that out with our transportation company. But remember, in the hybrid model, we're only bringing in half the kids to begin with at a time. And from our parent survey, only about 1/3 of parents, little more than 1/3, have indicated their children will be riding the bus.
With regard to the bus drivers, has any contact been made with Chestnut Ridge and other groups to find out how many bus drivers? Most of them are retired, okay, and maybe have some problems. Has anything been done with regard to knowing how many bus drivers would still be available to drive the buses during that period of time?
We don't believe that we will have any more of a driver shortage than we currently have. So what that means is we always have a shortage of bus drivers. We don't have any indication that it's going to be worse than that.
Well, if we normally have a driver shortage and we know we're going to need more buses, it's reasonable to think that, no?
I don't think it's not an option to use more buses. We could have more runs, but we can't have more buses. But this goes back to, remember, we're only bringing in half the kids at a time and only a little more than 1/3 of our parents. So that's really 1/6 of our students we're anticipating to actually ride the buses when we move to the hybrid model.
Will the buses be cleaned after every trip?
No, they'll be cleaned midday and end of the day. So we have what's called a tiered system. So we drive the kids to the high school, we drive the kids to the middle school, early elementaries, late elementaries. They won't be cleaned between all those runs. There's just not enough time. When there is time to, they can be, but often there is no time. They'll be cleaned after the morning run. They'll be cleaned after the afternoon run.
That's the responsibility of the bus company?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No? Well, thank you very much again for your attention and for all of your thoughtful questions. It makes us think about things we need to remember as we move forward, moving to September and then October.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for addressing all the questions.
You're welcome.
Okay. 6.01 board member comments. Any board member comments at this time? Ms. Reamer?
I just wanted to say to Mrs. Weber and to Dr. Castaldo that I watched the presentation that you gave the other night, and I sent an email to the whole board and to the two of you, but I also wanted to say it publicly because I think the presentation, I had my own opinion about everything and what should happen with the school district, and your presentation the other night really cemented it for me. And I really wanted to say thank you so much for the work that you did, as well as the whole Reopen team. But for you two, I just want to say thank you, because everything I was feeling, all these questions that I had, and I know I didn't post any questions. I just wanted the general public to ask the questions because we have this kind of where I can ask you here. But I just really wanted to say thank you. And you both did an excellent job. You were both eloquent and answered the questions honestly and relatably and clearly. So I just really wanted to say thank you for that. And thank you so much for keeping everybody healthy. You know, all over 4,700 and then exponentially outside.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay. If there's no other board member comments, then we'll close this portion of the meeting. And, oh, wait. Angus, did you raise your hand?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw your hand go up.
I was turning up the sound on my,
Okay. All right. 7.01, public participation. This is public participation on any district-related matter. Heather, do you have any public participation for this portion of the meeting?
Yes, I do.
You do. Okay. Can you tell me how many?
I just have one.
Just one? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. This is Jillian Munoz. She is a parent in the district with children at RP Connor. And she writes, last night, Mrs. Weber discussed the decision to cancel UPK for our buildings. I asked how a decision to cancel a school tax funded program that we passed a proposition budget vote for could be used for anything other than what we voted that funding be used for. My question was ignored twice before I said, can I ask why my question has been skipped? To then have the person reading the questions summarize in their own words, which in effect was not my question. I then emailed Ms. Weber, and instead of a reply to my email, a general public email was sent out promising our second and third choices for UPK. But the truth is, for many of us, that those choices are now closed. KinderCare and the YMCA are currently the only two facilities providing UPK. I don't believe they have the capacity to house every child, even if the federal funding is in place. Mrs. Weber and the entire board, you are doing a disservice to every young learner in the district. You are doing a disservice to every young tax-paying family who moved to and remain in this district for the opportunities you promise. Not to mention utilizing the pre-K teacher for anything other than an incredible pre-K teacher that she is. Either you're sorely mistaken or just feeding our district lies when you claim that second and third choices will be honored, because the facts are that Sacred Heart, Goddard, and Campus Fun and Learn are closed. I wish someone would have done their homework before such a rash decision was made. And if this wasn't a rash decision, and you knew this was on the table, then shame on each and every one of you for putting the foundation of our preschoolers' learning in jeopardy, and for weighing the value of one child's education for another. You aren't even sure how many families will feel safe returning to school, even when the doors are finally open. Perhaps utilizing a survey to have the families make those determinations before you assume that every child will return when the building is open is more appropriate. Further, how can you decide that K1 get 4 days a week, but no other grade does? And so that K1 gets those days preschool gets 0. I have an incoming first grader and an incoming preschooler. I want them both to be afforded equal education. Please explain to all of us how we had to vote to keep this program, but we didn't get a vote to cancel this program. This is not a topic we're willing to let be looked past with a couple of lines during an elementary school meeting where most pre-K families were not afforded the opportunity to be a part of. I believe Governor Cuomo asked you to have conversations with the general public. I wouldn't call what happened last night a conversation. I believe the conversation is just getting started. That's it. That's it.
You're muted, Matt.
Sorry. Thank you for reading that. Thank you for the submission. And that was the only letter you had, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this point, we'll close this portion of the meeting and move to closing comment of the acting superintendent.
All right, so I want to start to the parent who just wrote that letter. I will get back to you in the next day or two. It's been a very busy day. I will get back to you. I thank you for your patience. But I really want to thank Dr. Castaldo for her presentation tonight, for her leadership of all of our reopening team work. This is an incredible task with so many moving parts, and I really appreciate all of your work on it. I also want to thank my administrative team who have been, we've been together, feels like every moment of the day, and all working towards a common goal and, working incredibly hard. So appreciative for everyone's hard work. Our facilities team continues to work in our buildings, making sure our signage works. Every little detail is being addressed, and I really appreciate their hard work. I want to thank the board for your support. This was a tough decision, a very tough decision. We were the first ones in the county to come out with it. And now we see that almost every district in the county is doing some type of delayed phase into the hybrid. So I appreciate your willingness to support a decision that we were the first ones to make in our county. There were others in the region, but we were the first ones to do it. And I think it really, it showed our care, how much we care about our community. So I appreciate that very much. I also want to thank our community, everyone, those who agree, those who disagree. I hear you. We hear you. I understand that this is an incredible challenge from last night's meeting for working parents. There was a lot of people who didn't want this to be the decision, but there are also a lot of people who support it. I have received many, many emails and text messages supporting this decision, and that taking it a little bit slowly looks like the way to go. And it really has now in our county, almost every district has delayed the hybrid start. So I thank our community, continue to be engaged, continue to ask the questions. That is really important, and understand that sometimes you're not going to get the answer that you want to hear. But we are really looking forward to our start of school. Our students are starting school on September 10th. We will be there for them. We will work with our students and our families. Our staff is an incredible staff, and I have every confidence that they will do the best by our students. I also want to remind the public that our secondary meeting, the last of our required public meetings, is tomorrow night at 6:30. We'll use the same YouTube live stream setup that we've used before, and that presentation will be with Mr. Breen and Dr. Trust, and on our Suffern Central School District YouTube channel. So I look forward to seeing hearing from our secondary parents tomorrow night. And I want to thank everyone for all, this is, literally an unprecedented time. And I want to thank everyone for their patience and understanding and support as we move forward and do the best we can for our students.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you to everybody involved with this. I don't need to rehash what you just said, but you're spot on. Extremely difficult decisions, and just, thanks for everybody's support and all the hard work that everybody's put in, from the reopening committee, Dr. Costello, and everybody else. That'll do it for tonight. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Mr. McKenzie, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Raymer? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. This meeting is adjourned. We will see everybody again on September 1st. It's our next regularly scheduled meeting. So thank you all. Have a great couple of weeks.
Good night, all.
Right.
Good night.